Medina is a modern city in the Hejaz region of western Saudi Arabia, and the capital of al-Madinah Province. An alternative name is Madinat Al-Nabi. The Arabic word Madinah simply means city. Before the advent of Islam, the city was known as Yathrib but was personally renamed by Muhammad. The burial place of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, it is the second holiest city in Islam after Makkah. Medina is critically significant in Islamic history as Muhammad's final religious base after the Hijrah and the location of his death in 632 AD 11 AH. Medina was the power base of Islam in its first century, being where the early Muslim community developed, first under Muhammad's leadership and then under the first four caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr, Omar, Othman and Ali. In fact, Year 1 of the Islamic calendar is based on the year of the emigration of Muhammad and his original followers from Mecca to the city of Medina in 622 AD/1 AH. The Maliki Madhab places emphasis on ulama and scholars originating in Medina. Medina is reportedly home to the three oldest masjids in Islam which were built in the days of Muhammad, namely al-Masjid An-Nabawi, Quba Masjid, and Masjid al-Qibla Tane. Similarly to Makkah, entrance to the sacred core of Medina is restricted to Muslims only. Non-Muslims are not permitted to enter nor are they allowed to cross through the city center. Muslims believe that the final chapters of the Quran chronologically were revealed to the Prophet in Medina and are called Medinan surahs in contrast to earlier Meccan surahs. Overview: as of 2006, the city of Medina has a population of about 1.3 million. During the pre-Islamic period up until 622 AD, the city was known as Yathrib, an oasis city. In addition to its Arab inhabitants, Yathrib was inhabited by Jewish refugees, who came expecting the coming of a prophet as foretold in their books, in the 2nd century AD. Later the city's name was changed to Madinat Al-Nabi or al-Madinah, al-Munawwarah. Medina is celebrated for containing the Masjid of Muhammad and also as the city which gave refuge to him and his followers, and so ranks as the second holiest city of Islam, after Makkah. Muhammad was buried in Medina, under the Green Dome, as were the first two Rashidun, Abu Bakr and Omar, who were buried next to him in what used to be the Prophet House. Medina is 210 miles north of Makkah and about 120 miles from the Red Sea coast. It is situated in the most fertile part of all the Hejaz territory, the streams of the vicinity tending to converge in this locality. An immense plain extends to the south. In every direction the view is bounded by hills and mountains. The historic city formed an oval, surrounded by a strong wall, 30 to 40 feet high, dating from the 12th century CE, and was flanked with towers, while on a rock, stood a castle. Of its 4 gates, the Bab al-Salam, or Egyptian Gate, was remarkable for its beauty. Beyond the walls of the city, west and south were suburbs consisting of low houses, yards, gardens and plantations. These suburbs also had walls and gates. Almost all of the historic city has been demolished in the Saudi era. The rebuilt city is centered on the vastly expanded al-Masjid Al-Nabawi. The tombs of Fatima and Hussein, across from the masjid at Jannat al-Baqi, and Abu Bakr, and of Omar, the second caliph, are also here. The masjid dates back to the time of Muhammad, but has been twice burned and reconstructed. Because of the Saudi government's religious policy and concern that historic sites could become the focus for idolatry, much of Medina's Islamic physical heritage has been destroyed since the beginning of Saudi rule. Religious significance in Islam. Medina's importance as a religious site derives from the presence of al-Masjid al-Nabawi or the Masjid of the Prophet. The tomb of Prophet Muhammad later became part of the masjid when it was expanded by the Umayyad Caliph al-Walid I. Mount Uhud is a mountain north of Medina which was the site of the second battle between Muslim and Meccan forces. The first masjid built during Muhammad's time is also located in Medina and is known as Masjid Khoobi 1/4. It was destroyed by lightning, probably about 850 CE, and the graves were almost forgotten. In 892, the place was cleared up, the tombs located and a fine masjid built, which was destroyed by fire in 1257 CE and almost immediately rebuilt. It was restored by Qibla, the Egyptian ruler, in 1487. Masjid al-Qibla Tane is another masjid also historically important to Muslims. It is where the Prophet changed the direction of prayer from Jerusalem to Mecca according to Sunni hadiths. Like Mecca, the city of Medina only permits Muslims to enter, although the Haram of Medina is much smaller than that of Mecca, with the result that many facilities on the outskirts of Medina are open to non-Muslims, whereas in Mecca the area closed to non-Muslims extends well beyond the limits of the built-up area. Both cities' numerous masjids are the destination for large numbers of Muslims on their Umrah. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims come to Medina annually to visit the tomb of Prophet. Al-Baqi is a significant cemetery in Medina where several family members of Muhammad, caliphs and scholars are buried. Islamic scriptures emphasize the sacredness of Medina. Medina is mentioned several times as being sacred in the Quran, for example Ayah 9:101, 9:129, 59:9, and Ayah 63:7. Medinan suras are typically longer than their Meccan counterparts. There is also a book within the Hadith of Bukhari titled Virtues of Medina. Sahih Bukhari says, narrated Enes, the Prophet said, Medina is a sanctuary from that place to that. Its trees should not be cut and no heresy should be innovated nor any sin should be committed in it, and whoever innovates in it an heresy or commits sins, then he will incur the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people. History, Jewish influence. Into the older Arab town of Yathrib, Jews arrived in the 2nd century AD. There were three prominent Jewish tribes that inhabited the city into the 7th century AD, the Banu Qaynuq, the Banu Qurayza, and Banu Nadir. Ibn Qurtubi later reported that during the Persian Empire's domination in Hejaz, the Banu Qurayza served as tax collectors for the Shah. The situation changed after the arrival from Yemen of two new Arab tribes named Banu Aus and Banu Khazraj. At first, these tribes were allied with Jewish rulers, but later they revolted and became independent. Toward the end of the 5th century, the Jewish rulers lost control of the city to Banu Aus and Banu Khazraj. The Jewish encyclopedia states that they did so by calling in outside assistance and treacherously massacring at a banquet the principal Jews. Banu Aus and Banu Khazraj finally gained the upper hand at Medina. Most modern historians accept the claim of the Muslim sources that after the revolt, the Jewish tribes became clients of the Aus and the Khazraj. However, according to scholar of Islam William Montgomery Watt, the clientship of the Jewish tribes is not borne out by the historical accounts of the period prior to 627, and he maintained that the Jewish populace retained a measure of political independence. Early Muslim chronicler Ibn Ishaq tells of a pre-Islamic conflict between the last Yemenite king of the Himyarite kingdom and the residents of Yathrib. When the king was passing by the oasis, the residents killed his son, and the Yemenite ruler threatened to exterminate the people and cut down the palms. According to Ibn Ishaq, he was stopped from doing so by two rabbis from the Banu Qurayza tribe, who implored the king to spare the oasis because it was the place to which a prophet of the Quraysh would migrate in time to come, and it would be his home and resting place. The Yemenite king thus did not destroy the town and converted to Judaism. He took the rabbis with him, and in Makkah, they reportedly recognized the Kaaba as a temple built by Abraham and advised the king to do what the people of Makkah did, to circumambulate the temple, to venerate and honor it, to shave his head and to behave with all humility until he had left its precincts. On approaching Yemen, tells Ibn Ishaq, the rabbis demonstrated to the local people a miracle by coming out of a fire unscathed and the Yemenites accepted Judaism. Eventually the Banu Aus and the Banu Khazraj became hostile to each other and by the time of Muhammad's hijrah to Medina in 622 AD/1 AH, they had been fighting for 120 years and were the sworn enemies of each other. The Banu Nadir and the Banu Qurayza were allied with the Aus, while the Banu Qaynuq sided with the Khazraj. They fought a total of 4 wars. Their last and bloodiest battle was the Battle of Bu'ath that was fought a few years before the arrival of Muhammad. The outcome of the battle was inconclusive, and the feud continued. Abd Allah ibn Ubay, one Khazraj chief, had refused to take part in the battle, which earned him a reputation for equity and peacefulness. Until the arrival of Muhammad, he was the most respected inhabitant of Yathrib. To solve the ongoing feud, concerned residents of the city met secretly with Muhammad in Aqaba, inviting him and his small band of believers to come to Yathrib, where the Prophet could serve as disinterested mediator between the factions and his community could practice its faith freely. Muhammad's arrival. In 622 AD/1 AH, Muhammad and around 70 Meccan Muhajirun believers left Makkah for sanctuary in Yathrib, an event that transformed the religious and political landscape of the city completely. The long-standing enmity between the Aus and Khazraj tribes was dampened as many of the two Arab tribes and some local Jews embraced Islam. Muhammad, linked to the Khazraj through his great-grandmother, was agreed on as civic leader. The Muslim converts native to Yathrib of whatever background Euro-pagan Arab or Jewish were called Ansar. According to Ibn Ishaq, the local pagan Arab tribes, the Muslim Muhajirun from Mecca, the local Muslims, and the Jewish population of the area signed an agreement, the Constitution of Medina, which committed all parties to mutual cooperation under the leadership of Muhammad. The nature of this document is recorded by Ibn Ishaq and transmitted by Ibn Hisham is the subject of dispute among modern Western historians, many of whom maintain that this treaty is possibly a collage of different agreements, oral rather than written, of different dates, and that it is not clear exactly when they were made. Other scholars, however, both Western and Muslim, argue that the text of the agreement whether a single document originally or several is possibly one of the oldest Islamic texts we possess. The Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr was a key battle in the early days of Islam and a turning point in Muhammad's struggle with his opponents among the Quraysh in Makkah. In the spring of 624, Muhammad received word from his intelligence sources that a trade caravan, commanded by Abu Sufyan ibn Harb and guarded by 30 to 40 men, was traveling from Syria back to Mecca. Muhammad gathered an army of 313 men, the largest army the Muslims had put in the field yet. However, many early Muslim sources, including the Quran, indicate that no serious fighting was expected, and the future Caliph Uthman ibn Affan stayed behind to care for his sick wife. As the caravan approached Medina, Abu Sufyan began hearing from travelers and riders about Muhammad's planned ambush. He sent a messenger named Damdam to Mecca to warn the Quraysh and get reinforcements. Alarmed, the Quraysh assembled an army of 900 1,000 men to rescue the caravan. Many of the Qurayshi nobles, including Amr ibn Hisham, Walid ibn Utbah, Shaybah, and Umayyah ibn Khalaf, joined the army. However, some of the army was to later return to Mecca before the battle. The battle started with champions from both armies emerging to engage in combat. The Muslims sent out Ali, Ubaidah ibn al-Harith, and Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib. The Muslims dispatched the Meccan champions in a 3-on-3 Ma'la copyright. Hamza killed his victim with the very first strike, although Ubaidah was mortally wounded. Now both armies began firing arrows at each other. 2 Muslims and an unknown number of Quraysh were killed. Before the battle started, Muhammad had given orders for the Muslims to attack with their ranged weapons, and only engage the Quraysh with melee weapons when they advanced. Now he gave the order to charge, throwing a handful of pebbles at the Meccans in what was probably a traditional Arabian gesture while yelling "Defaced be those faces." The Muslim army yelled Yamana to the first Ramit and rushed the Qurayshi lines. The Meccans, although substantially outnumbering the Muslims, promptly broke and ran. The battle itself only lasted a few hours and was over by the early afternoon. The Quran describes the force of the Muslim attack in many verses, which refer to thousands of angels descending from heaven at Badr to slaughter the Quraysh. Early Muslim sources take this account literally, and there are several hadith where Muhammad discusses the angel Jibreel and the role he played in the battle. Ubaidah ibn al-Harith was given the honor of he who shot the first arrow for Islam as Abu Sufyan ibn Harb altered course to flee the attack. In retaliation for this attack, Abu Sufyan ibn Harb requested an armed force from Mecca. Throughout the winter and spring of 623 other raiding parties were sent by Muhammad from Medina. The Battle of Uhud. In 625, Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, king of Mecca, who paid tax to the Byzantine Empire regularly, once again led a Meccan force against Medina. Muhammad marched out to meet the force, but before reaching the battle, about one-third of the troops under Abd Allah ibn Ubay withdrew. With a smaller force, the Muslim army had to find a strategy to gain the upper hand. A group of archers were ordered to stay on a hill to keep an eye on the Meccan's cavalry forces and to provide protection at the rear of the Muslims' army. As the battle heated up, the Meccans were forced to somewhat retreat. The battle front was pushed further and further away from the archers, whom, from the start of the battle, had really nothing to do but watch. In their growing impatience to be part of the battle, and seeing that they were somewhat gaining advantage over the Kafirans, these archers decided to leave their posts to pursue the retreating Meccans. A small party, however, stayed behind, pleading all along to the rest to not disobey their commander's orders. But their words were lost among the enthusiastic yodels of their comrades. However, the Meccans' retreat was actually a manufactured maneuver that paid off. The hillside position had been a great advantage to the Muslim forces, and they had to be lured off their posts for the Kafirans to turn the table over. Seeing that their strategy had actually worked, the Meccans' cavalry forces went around the hill and reappeared behind the pursuing archers. Thus, ambushed in the plain between the hill and the front line, the archers were systematically slaughtered, watched upon by their desperate comrades who stayed behind up in the hill, shooting arrows to thwart the raiders, but to little effects. So they suffered defeat in the Battle of Uhud. However, the Meccans did not capitalize on their victory by invading Medina and returned to Makkah. The Medinans suffered heavy losses, and Muhammad was injured. The Battle of the Trench. In 627, Abu Sufyan ibn Harb once more led Meccan forces against Medina. Because the people of Medina had dug a trench to further protect the city, this event became known as the Battle of the Trench. After a protracted siege and various skirmishes, the Meccans withdrew again. During the siege, Abu Sufyan ibn Harb had contacted the remaining Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza and formed an agreement with them, to attack the defenders from behind the lines. It was however discovered by the Muslims and thwarted. This was in breach of the constitution of Medina, and after the Meccan withdrawal, Muhammad immediately marched against the Qurayza and laid siege to their strongholds. The Jewish forces eventually surrendered. Some members of the Banu Aws now interceded on behalf of their old allies, and Muhammad agreed to the appointment of one of their chiefs, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, as judge. Sa'd judged by Jewish law that all male members of the tribe should be killed and the women and children enslaved, as was the law stated in the Old Testament for treason. Deuteronomy. This action was conceived of as a defensive measure to ensure that the Muslim community could be confident of its continued survival in Medina. The historian Robert Mantran argues that from this point of view it was successful. From this point on, the Muslims were no longer primarily concerned with survival but with expansion and conquest. Capital city of early Islam and the Caliphate. In the 10 years following the Hijrah, Medina formed the base from which Muhammad and the Muslim army attacked and were attacked, and it was from here that he marched on Mecca, entering it without battle in 629 AD/8 AH, all parties acquiescing to his leadership. Afterwards, however, despite Muhammad's tribal connection to Mecca and the ongoing importance of the Meccan Kaaba for Islamic pilgrimage, Muhammad returned to Medina, which remained for some years the most important city of Islam and the capital of the early Caliphate. Pagan Yathrib was renamed Medina from Madinat Al-Nabi in honor of Muhammad's prophethood and death there. Under the first three caliphs, Abu Bakr, Omar, and Othman, Medina was the capital of a rapidly increasing Muslim empire. During the period of Othman, the third caliph, a party of Arabs from Egypt, disgruntled at his political decisions, attacked Medina in 656 AD 35 AH and murdered him in his own home. Ali, the fourth caliph, changed the capital of the caliphate from Medina to Kufa in Iraq. After that, Medina's importance dwindled, becoming more a place of religious importance than of political power. After the fragmentation of the caliphate, the city became subject to various rulers, including the Mamluks of Cairo in the 13th century and finally, in 1517, the Ottoman Turks. World War I under Saudi control. In the beginning of 20th century, during World War I, Medina witnessed one of the longest sieges in history. Medina was a city of the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Local rule was in the hands of the Hashemite clan as sharifs or emirs of Makkah. Fakhri Pasha was the Ottoman governor of Medina. Ali bin Hussein, the Sharif of Makkah and leader of the Hashemite clan, revolted against the caliph in Constantinople and sided with Great Britain. The city of Medina was besieged by the Sharif's forces, and Fakhri Pasha tenaciously held on during the siege of Medina from 1916 till January 10, 1919. He refused to surrender and held on another 72 days after the armistice of Maldros, until he was arrested by his own men. In anticipation of the plunder and destruction to follow, Fakhri Pasha secretly sent the sacred relics of Medina to Istanbul. As of 1920, the British described Medina as much more self-supporting than Makkah. After the First World War, the Hashemite Sayyid Hussein bin Ali was proclaimed king of an independent Hejaz. Soon after, in 1924, he was defeated by Ibn Saud, who integrated Medina and the whole of the Hejaz into the modern Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Medina today. Today, Medina, in addition to being the second most important Islamic pilgrimage destination after Mecca, is an important regional capital of the western Saudi Arabian province of al-Madīnah. In addition to the sacred core of the Old City, which is off-limits to non-Muslims, Medina is a modern, multi-ethnic city inhabited by Saudi Arabs and an increasing number of Muslim and non-Muslim expatriate workers, other Arab nationalities, South Asians, and Filipinos. Education. Universities include, Islamic University of Medina, Taiba University. Economy. Historically, Medina is known for growing dates. As of 1920, 139 varieties of dates were being grown in the area. Medina also was known for growing many types of vegetables. The Medina Knowledge Economic City Project, a city focused on knowledge-based industries, has been planned and is expected to boost development and increase the number of jobs in Medina. The city is served by the Prince Mohammed bin Abdulaziz Airport, which opened in 1974. It handles on average €20-25 flights a day, although this number triples during the Hajj season and school holidays. Religion. Islam is the religion adhered by the entire population of Medina, just like most of the cities in Saudi Arabia. Sunnis of different schools constitute the majority, while there is a significant Shia minority in and around Medina. Geography. The soil surrounding Medina consists of mostly basalt, while the hills, especially noticeable to the south of the city, are volcanic ash which date to the first geological period of the Paleozoic era. In 1256 Medina was threatened by lava flow from the last eruption of Harut. Devastation of heritage. Saudi Wahhabism is hostile to any reverence given to historical or religious places of significance for fear that it may give rise to shirk. As a consequence, under Saudi rule, Medina has suffered from considerable destruction of its physical heritage, including the loss of many buildings over 1,000 years old. Critics have described this as Saudi vandalism, and claimed that in Medina and Makkah over the last 50 years 300 historic sites linked to Muhammad, his family or companions have been lost. In Medina, examples of historic sites which have been destroyed include the Salman al-Farsi Masjid, the Rajat ash-Shams Masjid, the Jannat al-Baqi Cemetery, and the House of Muhammad. Climate. Medina has a hot desert climate. Summers are extremely hot with daytime temperatures averaging about 40 degrees Celsius with nights about 28 degrees Celsius. Temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius are not unusual between June and September. Winters are milder, with temperatures from 12 degrees Celsius at night to 24 degrees Celsius in the day. There is very little rainfall, which falls almost entirely between November and May. See also: Haramain High-Speed Rail Project, Hijazi accent, Jeddah, Masjid al-Qibla Tane, Nakhoila, Quba Masjid, Siege of Medina. References. External links: Medina Travel Guide from Wiki Voyage, Medina Live 24/7, a Medina. New International Encyclopedia 1905, archnet.org. Medina. Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA, MIT School of Architecture and Planning A.